Ukraine, a country on its way to being a NATO member, has effectively invaded Russia, and it's asking for permission to use British Storm Shadow cruise missiles. If Ukraine was already a NATO member, the significance of this invasion would mean that we were all at war with Russia, would it not, by way of allyship within NATO? Is it right that they should be allowed to use Storm Shadow cruise missiles?
Well, first of all, we've always been clear about the limits on the use of the Storm Shadow missiles in Ukraine. But let's be clear here about this. Ukraine has, under the UN Charter, an absolute right to self-defence. There's no moral ambiguity here. It's Russia that illegally invaded Ukraine and violated its sovereignty.
Is this invasion legal?
There is a right to self-defence under the UN Charter. There's no doubt about that. I don't think that is unclear. But in terms of going forward, what we have said is we will stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes. This has been a cross-party position in recent years, and it continues to be the government's position now.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, thank you very much. You've been very generous with your time. Well, I mean, incursion, sure. Invasion, some may say, into Russia. And the suggestion on the front page of the Times from an officer in the Kursk incursion saying that Britain should let Ukraine use Storm Shadow cruise missiles against targets inside Russia and cut President Putin's supply lines. You can see this edging towards an escalation, certainly, or a growth in Britain's direct involvement in this conflict.
Yes, you can. And it has to be said that ministers have been absolutely all over the place on that question of Storm Shadow missiles. On Monday, the briefing from Downing Street was the position hadn't changed. In the middle of the week, there was some suggestion it had changed. And now, obviously, in response to that call on the front page this morning's Times from an officer in Kursk, one of the leaders of the Ukrainian campaign, it is restated by Number 10 that no, they can't use Storm Shadow missiles to hit Russian targets. To that, by the way, the Ukrainians say, well, look, we have a big stack of weapons over here, and our apologies, we might not be able to filter them out through the place they're manufactured. But it's a really interesting test of, one, the government's desire to be seen to be supporting Ukraine all the way, but also the very, very fraught diplomacy of not seeking an escalation. Look, you've got David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has flown to the Middle East overnight to stop a war there. Clearly it's in nobody's interest for there to be an escalation, but at the same time, the government wants to maintain its very tough line on Russia. So it's very, very tricky for them indeed. And I'm sure we'll see many more statements on exactly what Ukraine can do with those Storm Shadow missiles over the course of the month.
Patrick, thank you very much. Really good to speak to you. That's Patrick Maguire, Times Radio's senior political correspondent, who you'll hear lots more from throughout the day on Times Radio.